Hello, everybody, and welcome to EnglishLogica.com's vocabulary series. This video will cover vocabulary related to ugliness or ugly behavior or being ugly. And we're going to look at a selection of vocabulary. We're going to split it into two sections. The first is synonyms for ugliness, and the second is idioms for ugliness. So, a lot to cover here and a lot to learn to help you expand your vocabulary. So first of all, we're going to look at synonyms for ugliness. And here are the words we're going to cover. You will see that we split our synonyms, as usual, into common use or everyday speech words, words that you'll hear on a regular basis. They're very popular in the English language. And we also have our advanced exams vocabulary, which you'll find in our advanced exams database, and they're more likely to come up in exams. So the words we're going to cover then in common use are unsightly, revolting, dreadful, disgusting, vile, repulsive, hideous, foul, and distasteful. In the advanced exams vocabulary, we're going to cover unprepossessing, odious, ghastly, abominable, repugnant, and grotesque. So let's get started then with the common use synonyms. Our first word is unsightly. And this is something that's unpleasing to the eye, something that's not nice to look at. If someone has an unsightly appearance, this might make people feel uncomfortable. Something that's unsightly can be something that you don't want people to see. So, for example, if you have a messy room, you would say that it's an unsightly room. Let's look at some examples then. Example number 1. I don't want people visiting us yet. The place is unsightly, with boxes and rubbish everywhere. Example 2. He hadn't shaved for weeks and his hair was greasy. In all, he was generally in an unsightly state. Our next word then is revolting and revolted. This is something that causes extreme disgust or even anger. So if something is revolting, it turns you off it, or it can make you angry. It's important to note that this is not the same as people revolting against something. Okay, revolting against something is like to rise up against it or to protest against it. Now, there is a joke that plays on this similarity. It's a well-known joke. It's used a lot in comedy movies. You might see someone saying, Your Majesty, we have to leave. The people are revolting. And the king replies, Oh, I don't think they're that bad. A little smelly, perhaps. So that's the joke, that they're playing on these differences, really, between the word revolting. So some examples then. Example 1. Oh, this meal is absolutely revolting. I don't think you cooked it properly. Example 2. You have a revolting attitude. There's no way I'm giving you this job. Example 3. I was completely revolted by the way she treated her staff. Our next word then is dreadful and dreadfully. This is something that causes fear or suffering or just unhappiness. So if something fills you with dread, it means you fear it or are apprehensive. It makes you apprehensive. In everyday speech, the word dreadful is overused. It doesn't have this much stronger meaning in mind when people say, oh my God, that's dreadful. They don't really mean that it fills you with dread. It just means it's something terrible. So it's played down a little when it's used. So our examples then. Example 1. Well, I think that's a dreadful thing to do. They must have been really upset. Example 2. It was a dreadfully disturbing time, and I don't know how we managed to get through it. Our next word then is disgusting or disgusted. You may have heard this one, and this is something that causes anger or revulsion. So if something disgusts you, it angers you or makes you feel sick. You can be disgusted by food and drink or by behavior, or when something falls way below your expectations. Okay, you may expect something to be very good and it disgusts you that it's not, for example. So example number 1, this drink tastes disgusting. What did you put in it? Example number 2, what you did was absolutely disgusting. I expected better of you. Example 3, I was thoroughly disgusted by the service in the hotel. I'll never stay there again. Our next word then is vile and vileness. This is something that is morally or physically repulsive, or something that is horrible to experience. So something can taste vile, or an action or an attitude can be considered vile. So it's two different applications for it. So if you're talking about horrible food or drink and you say, oh, that's vile, it's usually used in that exaggerated way. So it's hyperbolic or it's ironic. Now the noun vileness is awkward. It's rarely used. You won't hear a lot of people saying vileness. They'll talk about things being vile. So our examples then. Example 1, her whole demeanor was absolutely vile. No one liked her or trusted a word she said. Example 2, the police said that the assault was a vile act and considerably depraved. Example 3, ugh, this tastes vile. You clearly didn't follow the recipe. Our next word then is repulsive, and repulsion and repulsed. This is something that makes you recoil or move back, or it keeps you away. So something which pushes you back repulses you. If something is ugly or horrible and you recoil in shock, then it's repulsive. The noun repulsion is not heard very often. This is very similar. Repulsive then is very similar to the verb to repel. If something is repellent or you were repelled by something. But there's a difference in relation to something that it makes you move back physically or just keeps you away. Sort of, it's about experience or physicality. So, for example, a mosquito repellent keeps mosquitoes away. It repels them. So, some examples then. The way they presented themselves on stage was repulsive, and a lot of people left the show. Example 2. When her boyfriend cheated on her, she felt nothing but repulsion whenever he was around. Example 3. When he told me what he was going to do, I was quite repulsed. It was a horrible idea. And example 4, using this different form, it's not the same word. Example 4 then, there was a repellent odor from the man, as if he hadn't washed in weeks. Our next word then is hideous or hideously, and this is something extremely ugly or unpleasant. A hideous face, you may hear this usually in relation to a monster in a horror story, for example, and the face is misshapen or mutated. It's a face that sends chills up your spine. The word, again, is often used ironically or hyperbolically, or someone is exaggerating, saying, oh, that's hideous. And so it's about something that you dislike very much or you think is horrible. So example 1 then, as the mist cleared, we could see a hideous face coming out of the woods. So we ran like hell. Example 2, I can't believe you thought those curtains would match the furniture. They're hideous. Example 3, the Hunchback of Notre Dame was known to be hideously ugly. Our next word then is foul and foulness. Again, like vileness, you won't hear people saying foulness very much. You describe something as being foul. It's usually used in relation to odors. It's sometimes used ironically these days. Again, if somebody talk about something being foul, you might hear it in an old detective story. People talking about murder most foul. That's a classic phrase of murder most foul. So you'll see, you might have picked up so far that these words, they don't necessarily relate to ugliness physically, in the face or in the body or whatever, but it's about behavior or smells or things that are just a bit horrible. Okay, so there's a theme of ugliness, everything. So example 1 then, a foul smell seemed to be coming from the cellar. They said that's where the bodies were buried. Example 2, I think there are foul deeds afoot here. Perhaps an evil spell has been placed upon the village. So you see there's a bit of archaic language or archaic usage there. Example 3, there was a foulness in the air, as if something was rotting. Maybe again, either archaic usage or maybe a literary usage. Someone might write that rather than say it. You won't hear foulness being spoken very much. Our next word then is distasteful and distastefully. This is something unpleasant that causes you to dislike or avoid it. So if something tastes horrible, you wouldn't want to eat it again. So this is the idea of distasteful, and is something that is distasteful. You can think of anything as distasteful. It makes you wrinkle your nose or back away from it. So it even repulses you. Again, there's that idea of backing away from something. It's so distasteful that you don't want to be associated with it. You might also say that it's in poor taste. So you can see that connection between in poor taste and distasteful. Our examples then. Example 1. I really don't like the furnishings in this room. They're quite distasteful. Example 2. The company took an altogether distasteful approach to the media campaign and were accused of misogyny. Example 3. I just have a general distaste for that kind of music. I can't really explain it. Example 4. She looked me up and down distastefully. It was clear she didn't like me. And now we move on to our advanced exams synonyms. Our first word here is unprepossessing. Prepossessing. And this is not giving a welcoming or attractive impression. If something is prepossessing, that's the positive form, it gives a good impression. Okay, it creates a biased impression that something is good. But the idea is that you don't even have the facts. That it's an impression that's made without knowing everything about the person or the item, whatever it is. So the opposite then of something is unprepossessing. It suggests that someone or something has been unfairly judged, again, without you knowing anything about the person or everything about the person. You presume that they are unprepossessing, and it may be because of how they look or how they have acted in a particular situation. So our examples then, he had quite an unprepossessing appearance, but he knew how to talk to people to keep them on side. Example 2, the facade of the building was crumbling and it had a generally unprepossessing look to it, but they said it was nice inside. Okay, so you can see that unprepossessing, it may be a swift judgment, but there could be another side to the person or the thing. Our next word then is odious and odiously. This is something extremely unpleasant or repulsive or something hateful. So if something is odious, it makes you hate it or reject it. The details of something odious are too horrible to bear. And the adverb odiously is not used so much. It's not used as much as to say that something is odious. And this might have a more sort of literary approach to say it's odious. So you won't hear people using it. And this is a lot the same with what we have in our advanced exams vocabulary. A lot of people don't use them in everyday speech. So example 1, the detective seemed at first blush to be a rather odious character, but he had seen a lot of ugly things. Example 2, he was investigating a thoroughly odious crime, the details of which were not shared with the public. Example 3, handling the circumstances so odiously didn't help. Now no one wants to know us. Our next word then is ghastly. Ghastly. And this is something that causes terror or fear or just a horrible feeling. And like some of our words before, it's sometimes used hyperbolically. And that just means that it's used in an exaggerated sense. It's a real got an over the top feeling. It was, oh my God, it's ghastly. It's really over the top feeling. And it is a bit of an archaic word, a bit of old fashioned or out of fashion or out of use. You might hear it in an English period drama on TV, so maybe something in the 18th century, for example, the 19th century. It's similar in meaning to frightful or terrible. So our examples then, they dealt with the situation in a ghastly way, leaving many people with nothing. Example 2, my head is pounding. I drank too much last night and I feel ghastly. Okay, our next word then is abominable and abominably. It's often a difficult one to pronounce, abominably. This is something that causes revulsion from a moral point of view. An abominable thing is something horrible in moral or ethical terms. That's usually related to behavior. It's not about physical appearance. It's not that something looks abominable. And the reason some people might get that confused is you might have heard of the abominable snowman, but this is not about how this monster looks, how this creature looks. It's about its behavior. It's supposed to do terrible things, or it just shouldn't exist. It's morally just inappropriate, or whatever it is. So it's nothing to do with physical appearance. So example 1, abandoning her like that was an abominable thing to do when all she wanted was the support of her friends. Example 2, I'm not surprised she left you. You treated her abominably for years. Our next word then is repugnant and repugnantly. This is something unacceptable or in bad taste. So it's like revolting or distasteful. If something is repugnant, it isn't accepted or makes you turn away from it. It's something that you want to avoid altogether. Our examples, well, it may seem repugnant to us, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to understand it. Example 2, despite their advice, she dismissed them all repugnantly, and it did little for how they perceived her from then on. Our next word is grotesque and grotesquely. This is something horrible or malformed or misshapen, so something monstrous. The stone gargoyles that you might have seen at the top of Gothic buildings, especially across Europe, these are considered grotesque. And their bodies and faces are distorted representations of real creatures. If something is grotesque, it's disturbing to look at. And you could also use this in terms of distasteful opulence. So opulence is when someone displays wealth in a horrible way. It really goes over the top with it. Okay, that's considered distasteful. And number 1 then, oh, that guy is hideously deformed. His face is grotesque. Okay, so that's about the physical appearance. And example 2 as a different application. The way she threw money around and bought so much useless stuff was just grotesque. No one liked her. So that's very much about her behavior, or it could be even about her character. Someone could be considered a grotesque person because of the way they act. So in this chart then, as we do in most of our synonyms videos, these are degrees of ugliness. Now, this isn't to be taken as an authoritative way of using the language, but generally speaking, as you move from left to right across the scale, things get more ugly, we'll say. The level of ugliness increases. At the top of the chart here, you'll see the words that are in the common use or the everyday speech. And then below that, then underneath are the advanced exams vocabulary. So, for example, if something is unsightly, it's something that you want to back off from and go, oh, it's just unsightly. I don't want to look at that. An unsightly mess. But if something is hideous or vile at the other end of the scale, it's much more powerful. So the level is totally different. The same then with the advanced exams. Unprepossessing is when you make this judgment about ugly behavior, or an unprepossessing appearance. But move to the right of the scale and you come to repugnant and grotesque. And it's much more, a much stronger use of a synonym for ugliness. Okay. Okay, so we're going to move on to our second section now, which is idioms for ugliness. Now, so we have an ugly duckling, pug ugly, as ugly as sin, hit with the ugly stick, and an ugly customer. And then we have rear or raise its ugly head. And then quite a long one here. Fell out of the ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down. So you can see that these aren't very nice things to say to people. Or no oil painting and turn ugly. So we're going to show you some examples to go with each of these idioms now. So a little bit of a warning here for those who are easily offended. You will find some of these offensive. Okay, well, some people might find them offensive. So just a heads up in advance of these. So an ugly duckling. Example 1. When she was young, the old woman said she was a bit of an ugly duckling. Now she's beautiful. Example 2. I was something of an ugly duckling back in my school days. My hair was a mess, I had lots of spots, and I had horrible glasses. The next one then is pug ugly. Okay, you should know the dogs, the little ugly dogs, pug, although a lot of people think they're beautiful. So example 1 then, oh my God, look at that man, he's pug ugly. Example 2, I don't consider him pug ugly. I think he has nice eyes. The next idiom is as ugly as sin. Oh, there's no way I'd go out with her. She's as ugly as sin. So you see that these so far are about physical appearance and they're insults. Okay, they're going to offend people. So be careful how you use them. So hit with the ugly stick. Now, you don't use this in an active term. You don't talk about that you're going to hit someone with the ugly stick, or that it's not used in the present tense. It's always used retrospectively. You talk about something that has happened to someone. So example 1, that girl you kissed in the nightclub looks like she was hit with the ugly stick. Example 2, look at that poor guy over there. He must have been hit with the ugly stick when he was a kid. This idiom then, an ugly customer. This is slightly different. This is not about physicality. It's not about how people look. It's about their behavior. Ugly behavior, it's a figurative use. So example 1, be careful of that guy who's sneaking around the store. He can be a bit of an ugly customer. This just means that people can get angry or can cause aggravation or can maybe just blow up in your face, make things difficult for you. So example 2, make sure she doesn't drink too much at the party. She tends to turn into a really ugly customer when she's drunk. Our next idiom then is to rear or raise its ugly head. And again, this is not about physical appearance. This is about something arising that causes problems or causes difficulty. So example 1, let's just solve this problem now, and hopefully it won't raise its ugly head before we finish the project. Example 2, just when we thought the worst of the pandemic had passed, a new variant was discovered and COVID reared its ugly head again. And this is this long idiom then, fell out of the ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down. You won't hear people using this a lot, but it's well known. So our example then, did you hear what his mother said about his new girlfriend? She said she must have fallen out of the ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down. That was a horrible thing to say. She's not that ugly. Okay, so the idea with this one is that you're literally falling out. The branches are slapping your face as you fall, and you're getting uglier and uglier each time. It's very insulting. So no oil painting. Okay, if someone is no oil painting. So the idea being that an oil painting presents someone in their best light and they look as good as they can be. A portrait commissioned by someone always makes them look good. So example 1, I think I'm all right looking. I mean, I'm no oil painting, but I'm not ugly. Example 2, do you really think she's that good looking? She's no oil painting, in my opinion. And then our last one then is turn ugly, to turn ugly. Again, this is about behavior. This is about things, people maybe getting angry or things getting out of control. So example 1, we'd better keep the fans of the two teams apart after the game. Things might turn ugly. Example 2, everything was going fine until someone made an unkind remark. Then it turned ugly. And that just means that maybe a fight or an argument broke out. Things went from peaceful to unpeaceful. So we hope you enjoyed this video and you learned lots of vocabulary for ugliness to help you expand your vocabulary. If you visit our website, you'll find synonyms pages related to lots of these themes. There is a synonyms for ugliness page, and there's lots more vocabulary. There's nouns, adjectives, adverbs, and verbs to help you form much more comprehensive and elaborate sentences within the theme that you're discussing. So we'll put a link down below here. Just don't forget to like and subscribe to our videos, and any comments you have, don't be afraid to ask any questions and we will come back to you, and we hope to see you again for a live session. So thank you for joining us. Take care.